Hey everybody, Coach Toolshed here. Today I want to talk about Sekiro, Shadows Die Twice, which is the latest game by From Software. And this is a company that of course makes the Dark Souls games, Demon Souls, and Bloodborne. And this is a company that has quite a reputation for making their games very difficult. And sometimes I think that reputation kind of gets overstated quite a bit, and it sometimes scares people away from these games and the series in general. And so now with this new game out, some people are talking about how it's harder than Souls, some people think it's easier than Souls. I just want to get into the discussion of the game itself and explain why Sekiro, more than maybe even any of the other Souls games, really personifies what the series in general is trying to go for and what From Software does with their games, even though this particular game has stripped away a lot of the older elements from the game, such as you can't create your own character, you can't just create your own class and do whatever you want. You have a fixed character with a fixed set of skills, and basically you have to use those skills to the best of your advantage. You're not going to be able to go and grind out levels and try to get stronger than your enemies. You can't do any of that stuff in this game. It's mostly reliant on getting better at the game. And one thing I've always liked about the design that these guys use for their games is that there's no difficulty slider. And I know that that's sometimes controversial. Some people think that there should be an easy mode. Some people want it to be able to turn it up, make it a little bit harder. Well, the situation is that these guys make the games. They give you a specific challenge that they want you to beat. They don't care how you go about doing it. And in Sekiro, you play the role of a Shinobi, which fits this mindset and this gameplay premise pretty much perfectly when it comes to the way Souls does their games. Because like no other type of build, the Shinobi it's a trickster type character that's going to go about trying to use subterfuge and some dirty tactics to try to get through the game. And that's exactly the sort of tools that this game provides. If you got an enemy that's giving you fits, it's a little bit too fast, you throw some firecrackers on the ground and startle it, stun them, so you can get in there and get some cheap, easy hits. If you see a room filled with 6, 10, 12 enemies, well, what you do is you just systematically wait to see what they're doing. You go through and you pick them off one by one by using some stealth maneuvers, and that is how the game wants you to play. It's not like the other games where there's just going to be combat. This game gives you tricks that you can use to get through the game, and it some ways makes it a little bit easier than the previous Souls games and even Bloodborne, because in those games you can't really just stealth your way through. The enemies are going to see you a lot more often. You're going to be doing a lot more combat. In this game in particular, that is not the case. You can get free hits in on a lot of bosses even if they don't see you, because unlike some of the other games, you can escape battle a lot of the times. Not all the time. Sometimes you're going to be locked in a room with an enemy and there's going to be no escape. But a lot of times, even with the mini bosses, if you're getting into trouble with them, you can just escape, reset the area, and try again with no penalty. Now, is the game a walk in the park? No, it certainly isn't. But it's certainly also not as difficult as many people like to make it out to be. And using a little bit of cunning, a little bit of clever thought, you can get through a lot of these encounters. And even in the early game, although timing is important, you don't have to be pinpoint perfect through the first several areas. You can take your time and learn the game. And this game also has more of a gradual learning curve, I would say. It gives you a lot more of a tutorial section. It explains combat a lot better. You have a training enemy that you can fight with back at your base. I don't want to get into any spoiler territory there. This isn't a review. I'm not really talking about the minutia of the game or any intricate details. I'm just talking about this one particular aspect of the game. Now, what you're seeing in this clip, this is an early boss that you're going to fight very early in the game. This is actually, I think, the first mini boss that you're going to come across once the game starts proper. And what you're going to see, obviously, compared to the first enemy that you saw me take out in this video, I'm much more cautious, I'm much more tentative, because I haven't learned as much of the game. I'm not as comfortable with the system, and you can see that I'm taking my time, I'm trying to block all these attacks, and that's fine, but I'm not being very aggressive, where in the second video you see me blocking attacks and being aggressive, which is really how most of these encounters need to go. You got to keep the enemy on their toes. You got to try to take out that yellow poise meter, and as you can see just in the difference between these two video clips is how much you can improve just in a small amount of time because these bosses aren't that far apart. These are basically beginning area bosses. I'm still in Act 1, basically, although the game isn't split into acts per se, but it's the first third of the game where I'm encountering these enemies. So even in that short amount of time, you can make great headway as far as your own personal skill level, and that is one of the most rewarding things about the game. You can see yourself improving over time. You go back and watch these clips. I'm watching this now and I'm like, wow, I'm so slow here. But when I first beat it, it felt really fast paced and intense. But now I'm looking at it, I'm like, wow, I missed that opportunity and all that. But once you improve, you can come back and see how much better you've gotten as the game goes by. And here you see an enemy that you can kind of use to exploit with the firecrackers. You throw firecrackers down the ground against one of these animal type enemies, and it can stun them if you hit them with it to get some cheap hits. And this is another thing that I'm talking about, where you can use, it's important that you use the tools that the game gives you. You don't have to fight everything one-on-one in honorable combat. Like I said, you're not playing an honorable character. You're playing sort of a dirtbag trickster Shinobi. It's not a samurai. You don't have this same code of honor that you're going back. You have a mission you're trying to do, and it's basically any means necessary. There's even an NPC in the game that basically says that. It doesn't matter how you win, it just matters that you take your opponent down. And that is, and always has been, to me, the essence of these Souls games. It doesn't matter how you do it. You're not going to get a letter score afterwards like a lot of Japanese action games. Devil May Cry 5 just came out a couple weeks ago, and that's a game where you have a letter grade on the screen the whole time letting you know how you're doing. It's judging you actively as you go. From Software doesn't do that. They just say, hey, here's an enemy. Yeah, it's tough. We've given you tools to deal with it. Do it any way you want. And I just like how simplistic and simple that is. It doesn't overcomplicate things. And yeah, there's different ways you can do it. Some of them, the ways to beat these bosses are going to be much more difficult. There are some ways with these bosses that they want you to do it. For example, you can eavesdrop on enemies and they'll tell you that these animals are scared of fire and stuff like that. Certain enemies are scared of loud noises. So you can listen to the enemies and they'll tell you what you need to do to take out the bosses. So what am I saying all this for? Well, basically the bottom line is, this isn't a video where I'm trying to convince anyone to rush out and buy the game. Like I said, this is not a review. I'm just discussing this aspect of the game. So I'm not sitting here saying, if you've hated Souls games in the past, you should definitely try this. That's not what I'm saying. Chances are, if you've never liked any of these games, you might not like this. But at the same time, you might find enough different about this game that maybe you do like it. It is a possibility, but certainly I'm not encouraging you to rush out and throw $60 on it just because it's getting good reviews and just because it might look mildly interesting to you. Certainly don't rush out and throw your money down if you're not convinced to buy this game. I think it's good. I haven't beaten it. There might come a time when I come across a boss that I can't take out yet. I don't know. But I will say this. Throughout the first several areas, throughout the first 15 hours of the game that I've played, it's not insurmountable. And I know that I've played the other games. I played all the other Soulsborne games in their entirety, platinum to most of them, all except for Demon Souls. And so you might say, oh, you got this baseline gameplay knowledge to fall back on. Well, I would almost say that the way this game is set up, you don't need that previous background of the older games to fall back on, because the similarities in combat are very minimal. Basically, you sort of use your heals in the same way. Other than that, everything else is totally different. So knowledge of the old games is not necessary. Knowing how to play against this type of enemy, not necessary at all to pick up Sekiro. Now, really quickly here, I just want to show you a quick clip of exactly what I'm talking about in this game, how you can use anything at your disposal to take out enemies, and the game doesn't judge you. It will reward you no matter what, no matter how the enemy is taken care of. You are rewarded. So this is a hidden area that you'll find. It's not too deep into the game, but you can find this relatively early on. And the enemy up here in this hidden area will slice you to ribbons pretty quick. There you see him right there. You see him just fall off the cliff. Now, the first time you come up here, that's not what's going to happen. He's going to be sitting on top of this pagoda, waiting to ambush you. And the first time I found him, he started hacking me up pretty good. So what I did was, you saw I just came from the river below. I dove into the river after he got a few hits in. He chased me to the river's edge, and then you see, when I got back up to the top, I was going to try to ambush him, and I saw him waiting at the edge of the river right when you saw me come up to the top of the ridge, and I was like, oh, good, I can backstab him and get the fight going that way. But he jumped down, you saw, to try to chase me, and what's going to happen is, he's going to end up drowning in the river, and when I jump down there, I'm going to be able to just collect the loot off him because he jumped to his own death. Now that's something I didn't even have to really fight the enemy. I just lured him off the edge of a cliff by making him chase me. And that's completely valid in this game. He fell to his death. I didn't have to do anything. He's a tough enemy. Some people get stuck on this guy for a while. I lucked out, and I found out that, yeah, he will in fact jump off the cliff to follow you. And that's just one example out of many that you can use in this game to try to work to your advantage. And that's just something I wanted to show you. I thought this was pretty neat when it happened the other night. Not a lot of games allow that sort of freedom to try to trick AI enemies into doing something that will destroy themselves. Pretty interesting, and I liked it quite a bit. I just want to share that with you because I think it perfectly demonstrates what I'm trying to talk about in this video. Anyway, that's it for me, Coach Toolshed. Like I said, I'm not going to get too deep into the game right now and start talking about a bunch of details and whatnot, because this is not meant to be a comprehensive review of the game at all. But anyway, let me know what you guys think down in the comments below. Please subscribe if you want to stay in tune with the channel headed forward. And as always, keep it turned to 11.